Why didn't I prepare for this? Good morning. My name is Chris Fox, and today we're talking about how I am preparing for inflation, exactly what I've been doing. I came on the scene as a prepper in, I want to say October of last year. It wasn't really something I was into before then. I was aware of prepping, I knew preppers, and I, admired what they were doing, but it just wasn't a priority for me. I always had something else getting in the way. Well, I've seen enough now that I've been convinced that it's time for me to get on board. And I've spent the last 6 months frantically getting ready. I realized as soon as inflation was coming, that it was coming, that it was going to be really bad. Once upon a time, worked in the mortgage industry, and my job, part of it, was locking in interest rates and selling pools of $30 million of mortgage loans as mortgage-backed securities on Wall Street. So I got to watch the whole mortgage crash back in 2007. I had a front row seat. My company and almost every other company just exploded overnight, and I watched a whole bunch of people lose everything. So I started seeing some of the same rumblings. I understand that we're going to go through some tough economic pain, that it's going to involve some inflation, and I wanted to get ready. So I took a very straightforward approach that I'm hoping will be applicable to you. What you need to do if you want to get ready for inflation, in my opinion, is pay off all of your debt as soon as possible. This runs counter to what some people will tell you, because if you have debt right now and there's a bunch of inflation, technically your debt is worth less. So if you owe $10,000 and there's a bunch of inflation, then $10,000 isn't quite the same thing anymore. But that's relying on you increasing your income and getting a new job and making new money to pay down that debt faster. It doesn't magically make it easier for you to pay it off. I don't like having debt. I hate it. A mortgage, sure, great, I understand it. But anything that is not a mortgage is not something I ever plan to have in terms of debt. My truck has been paid off since, I want to say, 2015, so I have 6 years of no payments. I have a 2010 Toyota Tacoma that I plan to drive into the ground. I'll have for at least 10 more years. I'm looking for long term. I'm looking for heirlooms, things I can leave to my child. So many of the things that I purchased are tools that I think we'll all have and have a use for a long time. They can be used around the house, but they're also used to launch a business, as we'll see. Everything that I'm purchasing is either serving some function in my life, and I know I'm going to need it, like my pantry. This is food that me and my family will eat, or it can earn me money. I can use this even if there was some big economic crash, the shit hits the fan, the favorite acronym I think of preppers everywhere. I'm ready because I can rebuild, because I have skills that are relevant to the community around me. So anyway, let's jump into it. Let's look at some of the preps that I got. The first thing that I got was somewhat counterintuitive, a drone. A drone seems like a frivolous expense in a lot of cases, but I've already gotten a lot of use out of it. It's allowed me to scan the roof and look for leaks and send that to my landlord so they can get out here and fix it. I do a lot of aerial photography that I've used in videos on my other channel. I have a channel for writers. So I have ways that I can earn income and feed my family from this drone. It's not just a toy, but my thought is it's going to be much more expensive to get drones in the future. They're all made in China right now. The one I bought is Chinese. And it's possible we may not even be able to get Chinese drones at all. If there's some sort of war, Cold War with China, who knows what's going to happen in the next 5 years. We're living in turbulent times, and I hope none of that stuff happens. But even if it doesn't happen, I've got a drone, and I can use it to make money. That's the beauty of prepping. We're probably wrong about almost everything. I believed in 2007 that the system was going to collapse. I remember talking to friends about, trying to learn to make plastic and rebuild from the rubble as our, economy fell apart. And here we are 14 years later, and none of the stuff that I thought would come to pass did. But it doesn't mean I don't think it was a good idea to be prepared for it. So the next prep makes a lot more sense. It's very futuristic. Solar generators. You can see behind me on the counter there, that's a Blue Eddy. It's a Blue Eddy 200P, I believe. I also have a Blue Eddy 200 Max with 2 batteries plugged into it. And so between those, I have 9 kilowatts of battery storage. That means that I can run my business for about 3 days with no solar input. But it's important to note that my solar input is going all the time. So every day I'm getting solar. And even if we have a rainstorm, I'm still getting solar. It never stops. It just gets down to maybe, let's say, 20 to 25% efficiency if we're having storms. So I've set it up in such a way that I always have excess power, and that's important. One of my next preps was Pantry. I needed to make sure I had a ton of food, and you can see that's dry goods. And a lot of that stuff is stored in the house, and I've got, probably 3 to 6 months of every staple, and I'm still fleshing that out. But I also have the freezer full of food, and this is where, overwhelming fear came in, and solar really freed me. When the fire swept through Northern California in 2019, they did preemptive power outages as a way to kind of prevent worse fires from breaking out. We had extreme winds, and so I said, okay, for these counties, the entire county, we're just going to take down power. So we found ourselves without power for 9 days, and this freezer that you see that I've got, which I love, was full of meat, and all that meat went bad. I lost like at least $1,000 of meat, and I had to rebuild from scratch. So one of my big preps was getting this solar generator, having this set up. And so now I know that I'll never lose my freezer, ever. Like I can run this indefinitely, permanently with, just trickle solar panel, as well as the computer that I'm talking on right now and the printer in the fridge behind me and my power tools, which are some of the other preps that we're going to talk about in a minute. Everything that my business is now capable of doing is paid for by this solar prep. So it was really expensive, but I did get a California state rebate. So that was, one of the great things. So that took some of the sting out of dropping that much money into a prep. But, even still, it's very expensive. Also, I'm paying my power needs, which means that my power bill is lower. So eventually these will have paid themselves off, and it looks like I'll have done it within 3 years if they keep raising power rates. I also needed to make sure that my family had water. This is one of the first things they tell us to prepare for, and we had an edge because we were campers, so we already had like a Sterapen and some water filtration pills and some Sawyer minis because we do camping and high altitude hiking. I still felt a little nervous like that wasn't enough, and so I purchased these stainless steel jerry cans, which are amazing. And the reason why I did this is if you get plastic, you have to rotate your water out, let's say once every 6 months or a year or whatever you're comfortable with, depending on the material that it's stored in. If it's stainless steel, I can let it sit there if it's in a good, cool, clean environment permanently and never need to worry about it, ever. So that was the attraction for me. And so what I did is I picked up 3 of these, which were expensive, but we now have 20 liters of water per person stored at all times. In addition to, I keep a flat of water out in the truck and I keep another flat of water in the garage. And, I have some containers around that I could fill up very quickly to add to our water supply if we needed to. I want to make sure that we're covered there. I think that water is something that I'm very unlikely to need. It's one of those things that society has been wonderful about being, providing. But I don't want to be wrong about. I don't want to find out, oh crap, we can't get water because, without water, you're done pretty quick. What is it, 3 days without water? I don't really want to find out. So I make sure that we're covered in that regard. I've got great food. I've got great water. The solar ensures that I can cook all of it with no problem. But as a backup, I also have some propane and I have a couple of camp stoves, so 2 different ones. For the solar generator, I have a wonderful induction stove with this great pot that you can see. And these things are amazing because they'll allow you to make breakfast at a campsite if I want to go there. But also if we lost power, I can still do all the cooking I would do on a normal day. So everything in my pantry that I would make, all this pasta that I usually cook, I could easily still cook. I'm not losing anything. And that was something I picked up from Reddit. You want to make sure, just because you have food doesn't mean you can cook it. What if you don't have a can opener or a way to cook it? I wanted to make sure that I had those things, and that solar prep has been great for that. Beyond that, what else do I have? Power tools. So I got to a point where the basics were covered. My family food, my family water, all the toiletries I would use. I ordered, deodorant and toothpaste and toothbrushes. And if you can think of it, clothing, shoes, all the things that I'm going to use in the next 5 years. I looked for the cheapest, best deal that I could find that was quality, that was the thing that I wanted, and I got it. And I scanned over time and I bought some of it on sale and some of it, I just bought up front and suffered some pain. But the result is now not only do I not have any debt, but I also have like every need that I would have except for maybe rent and some basic food, fresh vegetables and eggs and stuff that I can't store. I don't have to buy anything. Like pretty much I can coast. My bills would be covered. That's the goal. I want my footprint to be as small as possible. I want to be as prepared as possible. And so I just keep buying stuff like this. But eventually you reach a point where kind of the bases are covered. And when I hit that point, this is where I really started dropping some big cash. I started buying power tools. My thought is manufacturing left the United States. And it needs to come back. And it's going to come back. It's going to be painful, but we're eventually going to begin rebuilding manufacturing. Well, I want to be one of the small islands of manufacturing that is happening. And so I've been learning woodworking. And I bought all sorts of tools to do that. A wonderful table saw, a router, a jigsaw, a circular saw, the list goes on, and I'll keep flashing things up there so you can see the tools that I've been buying. And I'm learning how to use each one of these. The Dremel was so much fun to learn how to use. So much fun to learn how to use. So I knew prices were going to go up. I'm getting in there and I'm snatching up these tools at a fraction of what they're going to cost us in 2 or 3 or 5 years. The cost of everything is going to go up. The cost of tools will go up. So if I can get the tools that I will use, then I think now is a great time to get them. Now, if you haven't also done the rest of the preps, I don't think tools is a great first prep to jump into. But for me, it makes a lot of sense, especially because I've been learning woodworking and I'm working on a new revenue stream. I'm making Game Master screens for people who play Dungeons and Dragons, and there are millions and millions and millions of them out there. It's a lot of fun for me to do. It's something that doesn't require me to, write thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of fiction a year, although I can still do that. It just, gives me another revenue stream and another way to work, and I've been gradually expanding. And one of the most important things that I added was the laser engraver, the Muse Core. This might be my favorite purchase. It's allowing me to create all sorts of things. It'll cut through glass, it'll cut through wood, it'll cut through acrylic, do all sorts of neat things that'll help me make money and also manufacture things. And so I'm backing that up with skills. I'm not just buying these tools and letting them sit on a shelf. I'm actually using them to create all sorts of neat things. The Warbench was one of my favorite projects, which I built for a friend. So I have a workbench now in my garage and can do more work. But when I have the friends over for a game, then we've got actually a convertible seat so that anybody can sit in. I'm just trying to learn to build and do and make new things. And I'm always looking for what is something that I can use in my personal life. So lots of people watching this, you probably already had your tools. I didn't grow up with them. I had never used a power tool except for a drill when I was 35 years old. When I got married to my wife, Lisa, I got a drill for the wedding, and I was like, yeah, I got a Makita drill. This thing is awesome. And I love it. But that was the only power tool I'd ever used. The sound of a table saw coming on scared me. The idea of a circular saw scared me. And now here we are, that from October to today, and today is April 26th, I've spent 6 months mastering woodworking, and now I know how all these power tools work, and I love them. I love my table saw. I love my circular saw. And I love it so much that I ordered myself a track saw because it wasn't quite, doing what I wanted, the circular saw. So I'm in it pretty thick. I'm going to get even more thick. I'm going to get myself a CNC machine. I'm going to start buying myself some 3D printers. And the reason for this is very specific, and I want to be clear that my plan should not be your plan. So I'm buying 3D printers because I've been a computer geek for decades. I've worked in IT. I've built hundreds of computers. I ran a computer store for years. I'm very technically minded. I have multiple software patents to my name, and I was a software engineer for years. So for me, the idea of getting a bunch of engineering equipment and building a workshop and then running that workshop, it's fun and it's within my abilities. But a lot of other people I see taking different directions. Some people are gardening. They've created an entire garden and they've got chickens and they're doing homesteading. And I think it's important for us when we're doing our preps, we all kind of have that same baseline, which is to pay off the debt and start getting your basic supplies. Make sure you got, X number of months of food. Make sure you've got your water. Make sure you've got your toiletries and your basic medicine and first aid kit and all that stuff. But once those bases are covered, then you pick your area to expand into. If you could buy property, then that's a great prep. Get yourself a little area that you can retreat to or own that will do nothing but skyrocket in value as the decades pass. Anyway, I hope this is useful. We're kind of dragging on. We're almost up to 15 minutes long. I've showed you a lot of preps that I've gone through. Some of my other videos will be a little bit shorter. They're going to tackle individual topics. I've got one on solar generators and how to calculate your power budgets and all that stuff. I've got one on power tools and which ones to buy first. I am going to probably put out a video every few weeks. Hopefully you're finding them useful. I would love to hear in the comments what more I can add to make it more useful for you. If you'd like to know more about prepping, I have written a book called Brand New Prepper. It is free. You don't have to pay for this. It's available on Amazon if you want it, but you can get it for free just signing up to the mailing list in the comments. All right, thanks. I'm going to get back to the prepping.